All right. San Francisco 49ers are up next. They kick things off with Michael Williams in the first round, the edge rusher out of Georgia at pick 11. Second round was another defensive lineman, defensive tackle, Alfred Collins out of Texas. And then just a whole lot of volume. Two third-rounders, Nick Martin out of Oklahoma State, linebacker Upton Stout, corner out of Western Kentucky, C.J. West in the fourth, Indiana defensive tackle, Ole Miss wide receiver Jordan Watkins in the fourth. Other key names, Jordan James, the running back in the fifth round out of Oregon, Marquise Siegel, the safety out of Kansas State. That's one of my sneaky favorites in the draft here as their second, fifth round pick. And then their most interesting seventh round pick out of the three, Curtis Rourke, the Indiana quarterback. What were your thoughts overall? I don't think a lot of people loved the Niners draft. They always go off their own board, especially in recent years. What were your thoughts on the Niners draft here?
Yeah, the Niners draft they had a draft where I think the deeper it got, the more I liked it. Right up top, I didn't love this draft at all. In the first 2 days, I didn't like it. Michael Williams is fine, but he's a player that I just don't think he's worth the number 11 overall pick. I think he's a pretty high floor player, but I don't actually know that he has the upside that a lot of people have been talking about all the way along. He's big, he's powerful, he's got some decent athleticism, but it's not spectacular athleticism. And he's been an underachieving edge rusher. He's been an underachieving pass rusher in college. And yes, last year he was battling through an injury, but I don't think he was that much better the year before either. So I think he'll be a solid addition because they've got Nick Bosa and they've now got some more weaponry along the interior. And he'll probably get decent production just because Nick Bosa is that damn good at creating pressure. I just don't know what the upside is here in Michael Williams. And if I was picking number 11 overall, I would have taken a shot at one of the other edge rushers that I think has a higher ceiling. Similarly, their second and third rounders, Alfred Collins, Nicholas Martin, I just don't know that they have phenomenal upside. But then the deeper we got into this draft, I think they started really adding some players that I liked and kind of repairing, I guess. I didn't hate the draft at that point, but it was fairly nondescript to me. But then the longer it went, the more I warmed to it with the players they added.
I imagine they're not great on Arif's rankings here, in part because of the third rounders. Arif's?
They are the second worst draft in the NFL relative to value, according to Arif.
That was my feeling. So I get the first two picks. I just want to talk about them for a minute. I thought Michael Williams, he's young, so that's where the upside comes from. He's still young, 1,100 snaps or so in college. I've called him a high floor prospect because of his run defense. Played a lot of four technique that's inside over the tackle where he's held his own with his length and everything. He's a length winner. I think at worst you're getting a good run defender. Base end opposite Nick Bosa. Old school base end. And I think the pass rush potential there hasn't been uber productive, but probably like more productive than a Shamar Stewart in college across the course of his career. And, maybe that continues to develop because he's on the younger side. But I get that pick. I get the Alfred Collins pick. You got a 320-pounder who moves pretty well, can shoot some gaps, add some depth on the defensive line. The concern there, he's a year 5 breakout. He hasn't done it consistently across the board, but I get it. He can bat some passes. He's got really good length. They had a ton of length up front. 35-inch arms of Collins and Michael Williams, a couple different body types to a defensive line that needed any kind of influx of talent. So I get those two picks, even if they're not I'm with you. Like, I wouldn't feel great about Michael at 11. I don't know if I'd feel great about Collins as the 11th pick of the second round either. I think the third round is where both players felt like reaches. Nick Martin from Oklahoma State. He's 5'11", 220. You go watch him against Arkansas. He had like 900 tackles. He flies around the field and everything. But in the third round, when you have so many needs up and down this roster, I don't know if that feels great for the Niners. And then Upton Stout again in the third, where he's probably more of a day 3 guy. But like you said, on day 3, I'm sure you like C.J. West. I like him as well. I like Jordan James from Oregon. I think he's a great fit. I like Marquise Siegel from Kansas State. And I also think when you add West to the mix, played nose tackle at Indiana, was really good against the run. So now you've got C.J. West and Alfred Collins at defensive tackle, plus Michael Williams. They needed to add bodies up front. They at least did that on the defensive line in this draft.
All right, that's enough of that, Steve. Over 50% of the people listening to this are not subscribed right now. So click that button, and then we can get back to whatever it is Steve's telling you about. Yeah, they did. I mean, I didn't love their first few rounds. I think they reached at a lot of those spots, but I think they got good value with some of those day 3 picks. And you can definitely look at this draft and you can say they seem to have had a real focus on upgrading against the defensive line generally obviously got a ton of talent added to it, but almost all of these guys seem to be heavy run focused type of players. I don't know if that's just coincidence with the players they ended up with, or if this is like a determined effort to say we are going to upgrade our run defense first, and pass rush is a secondary concern. But CJ West is like an incredible run defender, like genuinely phenomenal. The difference that he made at Indiana was absolutely nutty. And like, I think he can have the same kind of effect at the NFL level, even with his sort of body type, which is not that classic, 350-pound nose tackle type. Jordan James, interesting player. Like I definitely see what people like about him. And anytime you put a running back on the 49ers, it obviously piques the interest. And then Curtis Rourke is a fascinating quarterback in the 7th round. Like that guy, I thought was really impressive playing through a torn ACL, like playing with his knee all, scaffolded up because he had a partially torn ACL and was visibly kind of gimpy moving around the place. But he's got a perfect skill set for a Kyle Shanahan offense. Maybe he's only a backup for that 49ers team, but he could be a backup that wins games for them.
Yeah, just to touch on both of those guys too. Yeah, so West, Collins, and Michael added to the D-line, as we mentioned. I think when I watched Jordan James, he just felt like a super smooth zone runner. And it's like, all right, you're with Shanahan now. Go. Jordan Mason's out. Like, there's a path to, getting some carries in a backup role. So, like Jordan James in the 5th, I know you love Curtis Rourke. There's some Brock Purdy insurance there, Sam. They could just throw Curtis Rourke in there and let Brock Purdy walk. No, maybe not. Maybe not there yet. But then Marquise Siegel from Kansas State, who's kind of a slot safety hybrid. And if you just watch his free safety snaps, he's got incredible movement skills, ran in the 4.3s. I think he's just a really good football player too. And we just found out Malik Mustafa, one of their safeties, is out for the season potentially here.
Yeah.
And we just found that out during that weekend.
Not the season, was it? I think just he won't be back ready for week 1.
Won't be ready for week 1. So Siegel has
injured
it.
Like he tore his ACL in the last game that he played, and then somehow that lasted until like the draft before anybody found out.
Yeah, so not really sure what ends up happening there, but Siegel from Kansas State, like I said, was one of my sneaky favorite players. Is really productive, ran a 4.37, great explosion testing and everything, and you just watch him on film, and he's just, for me, just like a really smooth coverage safety type, and getting him on day 3, I think, is also pretty good value. So, look, I've said that this is maybe the most important draft for any team because of the turnover they've had over the last couple of years. They drafted 11 times. I think I would have gone a different way with a bunch of the picks, but right. I also think there's 6 or 7 who have a chance to really contribute here. So we'll see what ends up happening here. If their evaluations are better than what the consensus is, the consensus has the Niners at 27th. And we talked about the bias that graders tend to have for volume. That's how bad people thought the Niners draft was. They brought in 11 players, and it was so uncomfortable for people grading the drafts. They didn't like so many of the picks that the consensus has them at 27th, which is rare because usually you have 11 picks and I like these 5 players. Good job, good draft. So we'll see what happens. This has been the story of John Lynch's Niners. I would say over the last 3 or 4 years, most of their picks, I think, are a little bit off of what the consensus is. Not saying that's right or wrong, but they have hit a stretch of not drafting great until maybe last year. I think last year's draft will end up being pretty good for the Niners here. What are your overall thoughts here on the draft then?
Yeah, I mean, it's not right or wrong, except for a decent chunk of time. It was definitely objectively wrong based off how those players have turned out. I mean, that's the thing. Like, they had put themselves in this position where, okay, look, if you want to be, they do appear to be sort of as out there, as anomalous as a talent evaluation organization as basically anybody in the NFL right now. And for a stretch, that has not served them well. Last year might turn it around, but this year needs to as well because they're in a position where they've lost quite a lot of players. So it's going to be an interesting one to pan out. I wanted to shout out one undrafted free agent that they brought in. They brought in Corey Kiner from Cincinnati, who he was a guy I didn't really get to until after we'd done our running back rankings, but watched him after that, and he's fun. Like I think he could be a good player. I don't think his measurables were great. I think that was sort of the big knock on him, but his tape is excellent. And similar to the way like Jordan James with the Shanahan offense, you can paint yourself into easily being excited by that. Like Corey Kiner, the 49ers do this a lot with Shanahan. You get really excited about the running back they've taken, and it's the undrafted free agent or the 7th rounder that ends up being the better player. Like if Corey Kiner ended up being the guy to make noise in this 49ers offense instead of Jordan James, it wouldn't shock me at all.
Stop hating my guy Jordan James. Look, I think last year's Niners draft was pretty good. Dominic Pooney comes in, Renardo Green. I think Pearsall is going to be fine. Malik Mustafa. I think last year they started to get back on track with the draft. This one's going to be another high. It needs to be another high impact one where they've got 3 defensive linemen who can all contribute right away. And the only other question there is we thought they might attack offensive line in this draft. Didn't really get around to that. It didn't take any off. Connor Colby, the guard out of Iowa, is their only offensive lineman in the 7th round. That's the only other question that I might have is if that line starts to get depleted, especially if we're getting toward the end of Trent Williams' career, if that's going to be the next thing that they're going to need to attack. Because, look, the depth has taken a big hit over the last year plus in San Francisco, especially now that Purdy is expected to get paid. So this draft is massive that they hit on some of these players.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.